Okay, we finally got this case delivered to me and opened, and it looks like it's replacing tooth number 4. So what I would like to do is, first I went ahead and duplicated this, so we have the original plan and then we have my adjustments to it. So what I would like to do is go through and walk through exactly what I'm looking at when I look at these cases. So what I would like to do here is get the case here. I'm going to make the implant disappear for a second, and what I would like to do is just do some drawings here real quick, okay? So the first thing I want to look at is I try to visually outline the bone. So I'm going to say our bone is probably just like so, okay? Then I like to go ahead and visually outline our soft tissue. And based on how this looks, I'll say our soft tissue looks something like that. It's probably actually more like that right there. But again, I'm not overly worried about the soft tissue. But then I like to look at any type of anatomical considerations I have, and obviously we have a sinus right there. And then I like to look at my occlusal plane, which is right there, my adjacent teeth, right there. So basically the area that I have to work in is essentially kind of right here and right here, okay? So this is just to kind of give an idea of what I'm visually looking at to be able to determine where this implant goes. And quite honestly, this is a pretty generally straightforward, very typical type of case that we would see in our offices. So let's go ahead and remove that drawing, and now we can put our implant in there. Now, this was our implant that was planned. So what I like to do is, again, go through our checklist. The first step is we're replacing tooth number 4. Tooth number 4, I typically prefer to plan premolars for a 4 by 13. This one's a 3.5 by 13. So let's take a look and start with a 4 by 13. Again, there may have been a reason to go to a 3.5, but let's begin by looking at what is ideal, which is a 4 by 13. So let's look mesiodistally. It looks like we are pretty nicely centered between these roots. Actually, quite nicely. It looks like we have, adequate space. Certainly that's a pretty curved root there. So we have adequate space between the adjacent teeth. Maybe just a hair tight right there. So let's take a look. Maybe we just need to move that over just a bit and get that aligned. Next, we'll look at buccolingually, and buccolingually we're fantastic. We got enough bone on both sides. It's not necessarily about being centered. It's more about making sure that we have adequate bone, adequate width, and all of that stuff looks to be very good. Vital structures, again, we're looking at our sinus. So again, this looks very good. It's nice and away from the sinus, but yet long enough. So we're good there. Next, I want to look at our occlusal plane, and when we do that, we look right here, and this looks to be pretty darn good. I'm pretty pleased with this. I would be very happy with that as we see it. The next thing we want to look at is our occlusal table, and again, we'll go to the axial view here, and we will come up to about where we see the adjacent teeth, and this is where I noticed my first error in the planning here. Now, in an ideal world, what I'm going to do is turn my implant off here, and actually we can leave the implant on. In my ideal world, I'm going to use my drawing tools here again, and in an ideal world, what I like to do visually is see there is my buccal, there is my lingual, there is my adjacent tooth, there is my adjacent tooth, and then I like to see that my central groove seems to be about right there, and I want my implant to be dead center right there. And in looking at this, what we can see is that our implant is pretty close to being center, but we're well to the buccal here. Okay, so let me go ahead and get rid of my drawing, and what we need to see is we need to take this implant and move it to lingually so that we get it centered. Now, again, we have two ways to do it. One, we can translate a whole bodily movement of the implant and move the entire implant to the lingual. That will accomplish that, but then that will also make us thinner in this lingual area bone. The other alternative is we can tilt and tip the implant, either from the head of the implant or from the apex of the implant, and sometimes, as it will be in this case, it's a combination of the two. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and tilt the apex of the implant to the buccal, and that will move it more to the center, and then I'm going to tilt the head of the implant to the lingual, and now we are probably more in line with where we need to be. Now, another somewhat suspect way of, often accurate way of doing it is looking at the lower tooth, and again we can see that we are nicely lined up with the lower tooth. The lower tooth is going to bang right into the central groove there, and that's what we want. To give you an idea, if I go up to plan and use the original plan, we can see here how the lower tooth is not even actually going to be hitting into, the implant is actually pointing to the buccal of the lower tooth. So unless this lower tooth is totally linguaverted, that's not going to be a good plan. So we'll go back to my plan, and now we can see how this is looking better here. The last thing that we'll do is, one of the last things that we'll do is do our sleeve visualization. So we'll go over here to sleeve. It says no sleeve system. In this case, we're doing Nobel, so we'll go ahead and put the Nobel sleeve in here. It'll automatically select everything, and here we can see that the sleeve is going to be out of the tissue, unless there's all kinds of crazy tissue here, which I'm pretty sure there isn't. With CEREC data, we would see that a little bit better. I think the tissue is probably about right here. What I'm more concerned about, and what we can see here, is that the sleeve is hitting this tooth and maybe not hitting that tooth. So that also tells me that we're more mesial than to the distal. So again, we'll just gently move this over a hair, just like so. And the other thing that I'll know is that this is going to be tight. What I would do in this case is make a note for CCAT to let CCAT know that you understand that the sleeve is hitting the adjacent teeth, and know that you will probably likely have to do some minor enamelplasty disking with like a sandpaper disc or Soflux disc of the distal of tooth number 5, and probably the mesial of the restoration on tooth number 3. Our final check is going to be our 360 view, and again, as we're looking through, we're looking for any bone that may be incorrect, and this is pretty darn good. One of the things that we missed in our check is our bone level. So to help us with that, let me draw here the outline of the bone, just like so. So we can see, I like, just as is planned here, I like to have my implant just slightly below the crest of bone. If we were to be critical, we probably have a little bit of room to move that down just a hair. So again, a very good plan, very nicely done. The error in this plan was this was not centered. I don't know if we just didn't look in the axial view, but if I go back to plan 1, go to the axial view, we can pretty clearly see that we're out to the buccal right here in comparison to our revised plan going to the axial, and we can see that we're pretty well centered here. Again, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. It was a great pleasure doing this.